Welcome to Recurring Insight. It's the beginning of your upkeep, so it's time for another episode. I'm your host, Michael, and let's dive in. Today's video is a brewery episode featuring Lazav, the Multifarious. He offers a type of reanimation in the command zone. It isn't true reanimation, so you lose out on ETBs, and you need to pay the mana cost for the card in colorless mana, which cuts out the option of abusing higher CMC cards. However, it can be done at instant speed, which enables the Agent Maralen combo. He isn't tier 1, which isn't surprising considering tier 1 houses the likes of Cody and Najila. However, that still leaves a lot of room for viability. He is extremely underrated, mostly as a result of just about every list running Buried Alive piles with either Necrotic Ooze or Divining Witch. The piles are expensive and not very slot efficient, but for a long time, they were the best options available to Lazav. Commander Legends presented us with a powerful stacks piece that also serves as a combo piece. With it, I'd put him comfortably at tier 1.5. Let's take a deeper look at his strengths and weaknesses to see if Lazav's unique ability is worth building around. He helps assemble our win conditions by allowing us to use Tutors to the yard for the creature pieces in our combos, although unfortunately him copying Thoracle is useless. Some tutors work even better with Lazav and become one-card win conditions. His ability to copy creatures in the yard grants us greater resiliency and allows us to focus on supporting key threats. Although it's not normally game-changing, his ETB can help smooth out our early draws. The deck is generally fast. It's not the fastest, but it's capable of racing. Finally, his Dimir color identity grants us access to the most powerful interaction, tutors, and combo in cEDH. It's not all sunshine and skinwalking though. Artifact hate hurts us a lot. We can win through it, but we're light on lands and we don't have access to green, so it will greatly hinder our development. Graveyard hate doesn't pop up too often, but it is definitely played. However, we can pivot to the Forbidden Tutor combo, or manually assemble the Agent Maralen combo, so although it will hurt us and render a small portion of our deck useless, it's not game ending. Creature hate like Cursed Totem turns off the resiliency granted by Lazav and prevents him from helping assemble the combos, but we can still win through it. Although the repeatable removal variety of creature hate is more of an issue, there aren't too many viable pieces in that category. This means that there are a wide variety of stacks pieces that can hurt us, but we can always pivot if necessary. Lazav doesn't do well in long, grindy games. He doesn't provide any significant value by himself, and the deck is geared to win in the early or mid game. We have access to a relatively low density of engines, which Lazav can capitalize on, but generally, if the game goes too long, we're going to get outvalued. Let's take a look at how the deck wins. We run Tainted Pact and Demonic Consultation to exile our library, and then Thassa's Oracle or Laboratory Maniac to win. We only include Labman since turning Lazav into Thoracle won't get you Thoracle's ETB. It's nice to have an option that works with Lazav, as it offers resiliency, redundancy, and consistency since we are running Graveyard Tutors and a decent number of ways to discard a card. Agent Maralen didn't really go anywhere after the initial hype around it, which is understandable. In most decks, it's too clunky to be viable. Maralen of the Mornsong prevents card draw, while Opposition Agent steals each of your opponent's tutors. Since Lazav can copy a creature at instant speed, you can turn him into a copy of Maralen of the Mornsong on an opponent's end step. Since Maralen triggers in the draw step, you can also activate Lazav in your upkeep after you untap, if you are short on mana. At the beginning of your draw step, Maralen will find Opposition Agent, and bada bing bada boom, you've got a lockout. From there, you can grab protection for your Agent and Maralen, and either assemble the Forbidden Tutor combo, or steal a win con from your opponents. I typically take interaction from the first two opponents in the rotation, a tutor from the third, and a piece for the Forbidden Tutor combo on my next turn. It's important to note that this combo does give your opponents more leeway than most combos because it's really a lock. Your opponents keep the cards in their hand and get to untap, so they have more opportunity to interact or straight up try to win. However, if you can land it, you'll win the overwhelming majority of the time. Entomb is a 1-card win condition for us that costs 7 mana, although you can pay 4 mana one turn and 3 mana the next. Opposition Agent can also assemble the combo if you can steal the right tutor with it. Considering how many universal and creature tutors are out and about, most tutors will get us there. This is another point in its favor. Either piece of the combo can find the other. Intuition can also assemble it. Unfortunately, you'll need to make 2 payments, one for 6 mana and one for 3 mana. The pile is Maralen of the Mornsong, Opposition Agent, and Unearth. Unearth will definitely be binned. You can turn Lazav into a copy of the one in the yard and cast the other one. If you don't have access to Unearth, then you need another combo piece or tutor in hand so you have something to replace Unearth with. There is a line with Maralen, Jace, and any other card, but it comes with a pretty hefty price tag of 5 mana one turn and 6 mana the next. Now that we've covered what Lazav has to offer, let's look at the 99, starting with the removal. Chain of Vapor and Gilded Drake are both staples for a reason. There's really not much to see here. Cabal Pit has a low opportunity cost. Between that and us needing a singleton land base for Tainted Pact, it makes the cut. Deadly Rollick takes advantage of our 2 CMC commander. It does hurt off Ad Nauseam, but Ad Nauseam isn't our main plan anyway, and it's not enough reason for me to cut it. Drown in the Lock's versatility is what earns it an inclusion. There will be some times that it won't hit what you need it to hit, but due to the low curve of cEDH, it won't happen too often. Winds of Rebuke is universal removal that can mill us. It works well with our top deck tutors and hits our opponents. Moonsnare Prototype and Otawara Soaring City aren't legal yet, unless you're watching this on or after February 18th, 2022, in which case ignore that. They're more expensive removal, but they're universal and have low opportunity cost. They're primarily included for mana, but doubling as removal that avoids counters and rule of law effects is a bonus. Moonsnare Prototype can also blank Thoracle Winds if they don't have any other permanents with blue pips. I was running Toxic Deluge for a while, but it's been cut. It's relatively expensive and we don't really need to keep the board clear outside of the Agent Maralen lock, and we're not trying to keep the game going much longer after we land that. I'm sure the meta will eventually shift and I'll add this back in, but for now, it doesn't make the cut. Most of the deck's interaction isn't on the field, but on the stack. We run the best free counterspells besides Pact of Negation. Having to pay the 5 on your upkeep really messes with the Agent Maralen combo, and its drawback is too much to make it worth using as a normal counterspell. Then we've got the rest of the staples. These are included in almost every blue deck. They're staples for a reason. Miscast and Spell Pierce make it in because this deck is trying to win before the late game or even the late mid game, so the interaction needs to be lower costed. Drown in the Lock, as mentioned earlier, can be removal or stack interaction. Malevolent Hermit is difficult to interact with, and in desperate situations, Lazav can give you another activation. The flip side is very nice as well. Muddle the Mixture serves as both a counter and a tutor. This is first on the chopping block though. The deck is surprisingly thirsty for cards, and this is how we fuel it. Brainstorm, Gitaxian Probe, Ponder, and Preordain are the best cantrips. Without green, we don't have access to too many 1-drop ramp cards, and these are good turn 1 plays. We run the best engines we have access to. Then we've got some mass draw. One note about Ad Nauseam, we are not a Turbo Nause deck. Lazav doesn't provide enough value for us to recover easily after a failed attempt, and building around it significantly lowers the card quality of the deck. However, it's still Ad Nauseam, so we run it. Some hands do allow us to go for an early Nause, and we can do work with it, as our average CMC without it is a measly 1.28, but I'd advise avoiding a main phase Nause whenever possible. Time Twister shuffles our yard in, but Lazav doesn't stop being a copy when the target leaves the yard, so we're okay with that. Cephalid Coliseum has very little opportunity cost and helps us reach a singleton land base. It allows us to filter, put cards in the yard, and can ping other people using Thoracle. Consider is one of the best cantrips outside of the 4 main ones. It's even better for us since it gives us the chance to mill the card, which makes it very good with tutors to the top of our deck. Frantic Search makes it in solely because it's discard at instant speed that's essentially free. Being able to put cards in the yard at instant speed is important, as passing with Maralen in the yard gives the pod a chance to focus on Lazav. There weren't really any comparable effects at a reasonable rate and at instant speed. Jace, Vern's Prodigy, can serve as draw initially and as recursion later on. It does also put cards in the yard, which can be helpful. I don't run many effects like it because it doesn't actually net any cards, but this is far and away the best option. We can't protect Planeswalker Jace very well, but when he dies, we can at least turn Lazav into a copy of Jace so we get to keep using it as a draw engine. I really wish we had space for Thought Scour, but we just don't have any slots open for it. We've got a pretty high density of better 1-drops. We have access to black, and thus get the best tutors in the format. Speaking of which, here they are. The top deck tutors do work well with Lazav's ETB since you can mill your target. I typically try to avoid this route, since you'll need to pay at least 1 mana for the top deck tutor, 2 mana for Lazav, and then 3 mana to turn Lazav into Maralen. Limdul's Vault splits it up with 2 mana one turn and 5 mana the next turn. This is just to get Maralen on the field, so you'll still have to pay for Agent, bringing you to a total of 9 or 10 mana split across 2 turns. Either way, you're paying more on the combo turn, while giving the pod a full round to interact or find interaction after telegraphing that you have the combo ready. Although it isn't my first choice, if you haven't cast Lazav until later in the game, it is a viable option. Entomb can single-handedly assemble the Agent Mornsong combo. As mentioned before, Intuition can assemble the combo as well, although it is more expensive. Tainted Pact and Demonic Consultation are part of the Forbidden Tutor combo, since, they are the Forbidden Tutors. Consult is really only useful as a tutor in times of desperation. Tainted Pact has more utility and is especially good, since either Praetor's Grasp or the Agent Maralen combo can steal an opponent's win condition. You won't have to worry too much about exiling your own. Ideally, you'll hit Entomb. If you cast it in response to a tutor, you can also grab Opposition Agent. Maralen is really the only piece you don't want to hit unless you've got Agent, a tutor, or a discard outlet in hand. Muddle the Mixture only makes it in since it's also stack interaction. It can find both halves of the Forbidden Tutor combo, Dauthi Voidwalker, or, worst case scenario, Demonic Tutor. Praetor's Grasp makes it in for tutor density. Solve the Equation is generally good. Not exceptional, but good. Spellseeker isn't as good, but there will rarely be a time that we don't have a good target for it. Unmarked Grave unfortunately can't find Maralen. I typically use it to find Dauthi Voidwalker, but it can also find interaction with Malevolent Hermit. We don't run much stacks, since we're not geared towards playing grindy, but a few pieces make the cut. Dauthi Voidwalker is an all-star in this deck. You can get a second Dauthi after cracking your first one by using Lazav. Between them, you can accrue a truly impressive amount of cards with void counters. Notion Thief lets us steal card draw. We like drawing cards, and we like our opponents not drawing cards, so we run this. If it gets binned or countered, you've got Lazav as a backup for it, but unfortunately you'll most likely miss whatever spell you cast the original for, since you'll need to pay 4 mana to get the copy. Opposition Agent stops our opponent's tutors and is a combo piece. Nuff said. Since Lazav is essentially recursion, we don't run much. Agadeem's Awakening will almost always be played as a land. It does slightly raise the average CMC for ad nauseam, but I think it's worth it. Although you'll rarely cast it, it's nice to have it as an option if you get desperate. Jace makes it in because it's draw as well. Unearth we run for the Intuition pile, and because it hits most things we want to recur. It made the cut over Reanimate, because although the Reanimation can be the difference between winning and losing, we do have Lazav. It having cycling means we don't have to deal with a dead card in hand. Finally, we've got the Mitochondria of the deck. First up, we've got the best free ramp. Lotus Petal isn't on the same power level by a long shot, but it fits our game plan. Then we've got the rest of the staple rocks. Although we don't invest too heavily into rituals, these two are too good to exclude. These spells aren't the most popular, but they create a really nice play pattern. Turn 1, ramp. Turn 2, cast Lazav. By turn 3, if you've hit your land drops, you have enough mana to search for the win with mana up or go for the win. Additionally, Bloodped is a target for Lazav. It's not something that's relevant very often, but it is something I've needed to do before. Mox Amber takes advantage of our 2 CMC commander, while Talisman of Dominance is a solid 2 CMC rock. I'm not going to go over the lands, since I've already talked about the utility lands in the other sections, Instead, let's take a closer look at the overall game plan of the deck. There are a couple different directions this deck can go depending on the opening hand. The first is pretty straightforward and relies on having a tutor in hand. Develop in the beginning turns, holding up interaction when possible and available, find Entomb or Ad Nauseam unless you have them or another combo piece in hand, and go for the win. We run a pretty significant amount of tutors, so this is the most common route. The second option is definitely slower. There are a few key cards that can be ridden to victory, and if you've got one in hand, you can leverage it until you can assemble a win. The first two are creatures, which works well with Lazav. If you get any of the 3 best draw engines, you'll be in a pretty good position. Windfall and Time Twister with a decent amount of ramp lets you dump your hand and refill it. You do want to make sure you've got the ramp to support it, because your opponents will get new hands as well. You want to aim for 2 different routes in your hand unless you have a surplus of interaction to support just one, or you had to mull a few times. And there we go, that covers this iteration of Lazav. He was actually the first commander I ever built, and although I tried building him in cEDH before, I was excited to revisit a more viable version of him. If anybody decides to give him a try, the list is linked in the description, let me know how you do. The link for my Twitter and Insta is also in the description. I do run polls on Twitter to determine the topics for future videos. Speaking of which, next week we'll be going over the cards from Neon Dynasty to see which ones are best suited for cEDH. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for taking the time to watch. I'm your host Michael, and I'll see you at the beginning of your next upkeep for another episode of Recurring Insight.